Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Me Time. I am your host, Megan, and today I'm going to be recording a two-part video. First part is going to be about my personal nursing experience and some of the decisions that I made before deciding to go back to obtain my master's and to become a nurse practitioner. And then part two is going to be more geared towards the individual that wants to learn about questions to ask to a specific MSN program or questions to consider before determining if it's your time to go back to obtain your nurse practitioner license, and a little bit of the ups and downs of the process, as well as some of the questions that I wish I really had asked for. So I hope you enjoy part two. Don't forget to link to part two. So this is part one. Part one is really just talking about my own nursing experience and my own nursing background. I have been a nurse now for coming up on 10 years, and I have been a nurse practitioner for about 3 years or coming up on 3 years. I am board certified in both adult gerontology primary care, which is 13 years and older, as well as in women's health. Before I went back to obtain my NP, I was a nurse for about five or so years. I kind of honestly fell into the career path of being a nurse. I didn't really, looking back, I don't think I fully understood what it meant to be a nurse. I just knew that there was a lot of flexibility in the position and that you had a lot of opportunities as a nurse. And you didn't have to necessarily have like one specialty or one setting of work. Like you could do inpatient, outpatient, specialty setting. You could do school nursing. There was a lot of flexibility. Something else that drew me to nursing was that I could make a pretty good financial living after graduation. And I also enjoyed knowing that at the end of the day, I would graduate with a degree that I could utilize and get paid pretty well to support myself. I also wanted a career where I could be flexible. And that was really important to me at the time. As an 18-year-old, I wanted flexibility. I also wanted an opportunity to be able to travel. And I knew travel nursing was definitely an option. And that really drew me to become a nurse. I figured, that sounds something right up my alley that I would really be excited about. So I knew in the future I wanted to be a travel nurse, but obviously I knew it was going to take quite some time to get there. All I really knew as an 18-year-old was that I liked the human body. I really liked anatomy class. I enjoyed helping others. And I also loved being active and advocating for health. So that's kind of what pushed me towards a nursing program. And I'm very thankful I ended up going the nursing route. I think it was a great career choice for myself. I really ended up falling in love with it. I did a traditional BSN program where I did a 4-year undergraduate program where I graduated with my bachelor's of science in nursing. While I was in my program, I was a CNA at a local hospital in my last year and over the summer. And I had other jobs that did not pertain to nursing, but that was just a good way to get my foot in the door. Once I graduated, I ended up taking an intermediate care position. So doing kind of like step down from the ICU for about a year and a half. And then I knew I wanted to go into ICU nursing. It was just a matter of having good experience and getting a position at that time. So once an ICU position opened that I was able to transfer to, I ended up training in the cardiovascular ICU where I was there for 2 years before I decided now I feel more comfortable going back to be a travel nurse and to start traveling. I was in my mid 20s basically, and was a good time in my life. I wanted to change. I had been in the DC area for many years and it was time to change it up. I also wanted to feel very confident in my skills as a travel nurse. I wanted to make sure I had a lot of experience. I wanted to make sure that I could be thrown into any situation and feel very confident that I could handle it from a clinical perspective and sense of like knowing how to handle to take care of the patient and to feel very confident about that. I also knew that, I traveled before kind of like the travel nursing boom of COVID, and you definitely needed experience before you were going to travel, especially if you were an ICU travel nurse. I feel that when I was a travel nurse, it definitely pushed my boundaries as a nurse in the sense that it pushed me to get outside my comfort zone a little bit. So I had a lot of experience. I was a float ICU nurse. I got to float to all different types of ICUs, which I actually really enjoyed because if you're stuck in cardiac your whole life, you kind of miss out on different aspects of like the medical side or the surgical side. So it was really fun for me to be able to not be on one floor all the time. So I actually really enjoyed that, and it grew a lot as a nurse. And kind of during that last year and a half, I really realized that, you know what, I think I'm ready to take the next step and, go back to school and maybe think about becoming a nurse practitioner. If you asked me at the beginning, like even when I became a travel nurse, I was not thinking about going back to get my master's. I had no clue what that really meant or what that really looked like. At the time, the only people I really knew that were going back to get their NP license were people that really were focused on getting their CRNA or nurse anesthetist, and you had to have some significant ICU experience before that. And most of my friends in the ICU were kind of going on that path towards like acute care or anesthesia. And I had I definitely knew that wasn't for me. I realized during being a nurse or bedside nurse that I don't really want to be in the hospital my whole life. I really enjoyed connecting with my patients. I enjoyed promoting health and wellness and I also enjoyed community health, and I wanted to be more on that outpatient perspective and a health prevention focus. And I realized that that was likely going to happen outside the hospital. I also, not that it can't happen inside, that's just kind of what I wanted. I also recognized that I don't think I wanted to do acute care my whole life as well. That took a lot to get me to that point. I think it's so easy to fall into the path of like, okay, I'm on this path. This is just makes sense as the next best step, or this is like the best financial move for a nursing career. But I really focused on what I felt like I was going to be happy with in the long term. So that's why I decided to choose to go back to school when I did. In particular, I don't think I was even, when I applied to my program, I don't even know if I was 100% like ready. Like once I feel like after I applied and I was waiting to hear back, I was definitely disappointed that I didn't apply to more than one program, because all I did was apply to one program, and I'll kind of talk about that in a second. But I wish I had applied to more, because I realized then that, okay, if I didn't get in, like, would I have been upset if I didn't get in? Or am I truly like ready to go back and get my master's? How am I feeling about being a bedside nurse where I am right now in my career? So for me, I definitely recognize that I was ready for a change, and that's what I was seeking. And also, the beauty of nursing is, even if you're ready for a change, that could mean that you could switch up the type of nurse you are, the type of care setting you're in. There are so many opportunities. So that's the wonderful part about going into the field of nursing. You just need to be very honest with yourself on what that means, because sometimes it doesn't mean going back and obtaining higher education or getting your master's or doing nursing informatics, because there's many different trajectories. You have to also be aware of, at the end of the day, if I do go back for some higher education, financially, you don't always, it might not be a huge payoff or a big pay difference to what you're doing now, or the flexibility might change. So you really just have to focus on what you want and your needs for you, yourself, and your family. So my particular program is, all I knew is I liked adults at the time. I didn't really work with children very often, or we barely worked with kids in my nursing setting, just because it was more older adults in the ICU. I wasn't working at pediatric hospitals. And I kind of knew that for older adults, I definitely wanted to focus more on adults. And I also really enjoyed working with women. I loved advocating for women, promoting women's health, and I knew I wanted to incorporate that somehow into my training. I didn't necessarily want to go back and get my women's health nurse practitioner certification only. I definitely thought that that was appealing to me, but I didn't want to only do that, and I didn't necessarily just want to do the just like an adult medicine track. So I actually found a program that had a dual track where you're obtaining both certificate, you get your master's and end up graduating 2 certifications at the same time. So I did a track that was both women's health NP and also adult gerontology primary care nurse practitioner. So for me, I didn't feel confident that I would necessarily get as much women's health training in my adult gero rotation as through that program. And I'm glad, because I did not. And then vice versa, I was really happy I didn't just go the women's health route, because I wanted to have a broad spectrum and come out with the most, a very broad focus, so that I could apply this to any type of job setting. In hindsight, I think I should have considered more of the FMP route, just for completeness, to have the whole lifespan, because depending on where you live, which I'll get into in my second video, that can make a big difference. If you're in a location that really is looking for a family nurse practitioner to see the full lifespan scope, that could definitely be a hindrance towards your application. But I think that that's more and more, there's more specialty NP fields. So there's nothing wrong with doing a specialty. Just make sure that that's really what you want to do at the end of the day. So I did my dual program, which I ended up applying part-time. I actually offered to switch to full-time once I got in, and when I realized that I got into the program. Because when I looked at it on paper, it was going to take me, I think it was going to take me a full 3 years, 3+ years to complete the program part-time in order for me to work. And at that point in time, I was like, that is too long. Like, I don't want to spend 3 years getting working towards my end goal. I would personally rather go back full-time, and I had the capability to do that financially, and also just like where I was at in my life, that was an opportunity to do that. So I ended up going full-time, and actually was really happy I did. And everyone's going to be a little bit different, but you have to be really honest with yourself about what your focus is going to be moving forward. Do you need to work through school? How much do you need to work through school? What, where location wise are you going to be located? What type of program are you going to go to? Is it a distance program? Is it a local program? Are you even going to be living in the same state that your program, that your school is in? So these are all things to consider. Anyways, I'm now 3 years post grad, and we're coming up on, I am 3 years post grad, coming up on 3 years of practicing as a licensed nurse practitioner. And I've had quite a wild ride the last 3 years, which I'll talk about in further interviews. But that's a little bit about my nursing background and my nursing and work experience before I even decided to go back to become a travel nurse, and also before I came back, or I decided to go back to obtain my NP license. So check out part 2. This is the part that future students might want to tune into, because it's really going to dive into different programs and questions to ask, and some of the mistakes I made when I applied to my master's program and when I chose my school. Looking forward to seeing you guys next time on To Me Time. Like and subscribe.